King Solomon loved God, but he did not love God with his whole heart. Solomon had hundreds of wives, and many of them were from other nations. Solomon's wives turned him away from God, and he began to worship the false gods that his wives worshiped. God was angry. God said to Solomon, "Since you have done this, I will take the kingdom away from you. You will be the king the rest of your life, but when your son becomes king, he will lose everything except for one tribe."
When Solomon died, his son Rehoboam became king. The people told Rehoboam, "Your father, Solomon, made us work too hard. We will gladly serve you if you make our work easier." Rehoboam thought about it and asked his father's friends for advice. "Be kind to the workers, and they will work for you forever," they said. But Rehoboam ignored that advice.
He asked his own friends what he should do. Rehoboam listened to his friends and told the workers, "My father did not make you work hard enough. I'll make you work even harder." The people did not want to serve a king like Rehoboam, so they made Jeroboam king. Jeroboam had been one of Solomon's officials. Now he was king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Only one tribe remained under Rehoboam's rule, and that was the southern kingdom of Judah.
Rehoboam did not like being king of only one tribe. He planned to attack the northern kingdom of Israel, but God sent a prophet to stop him. The prophet had a message from God. "Do not fight them. The people of Israel are part of your family. I am the Lord, and I am in control of what is happening." So Rehoboam went home.
Now, Jeroboam was the king of Israel, but he wasn't a good king. When the people of Israel traveled to Jerusalem to worship God at the temple, Jeroboam worried that they would start thinking of Rehoboam as their leader. So Jeroboam made 2 golden calves and told the people, "Going to Jerusalem is too difficult for you. Here are your gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt. You can worship them." What Jeroboam did was a sin. Those calves did not lead God's people out of Egypt. God led his people out of Egypt. Jeroboam led all the people to worship the false gods instead of the one true God.
King Solomon failed to lead God's people perfectly. God's people needed a better king, a perfect king. Through David's family, God would send his own son, Jesus Christ, to be a perfect king over God's people forever. Jesus is greater than Solomon. Jesus brings his people together and leads them back to God.
Solomon had walked away from God in his heart, which caused him to walk away in his actions. And so your question, does God care that we go to church every week? What happens if I don't want to go? Well, here's the thing. I need to take that into 2 parts. The first one is, does God care if I go every week? God is not keeping some cosmic scoreboard. He's not keeping track of every time you're there and for how long and so forth. It's not about that. But that second part of the question, I think, is where we have to camp out. That I would ask you, why don't you want to gather together with the church? Why don't you want to go and worship God? That's what God cares about. You see, because if we love God, if we are grateful for what He's done for us, then we should want to gather together with other believers and worship Him on a regular basis, understanding there are times that we can't make it to church. There may be times where we're sick, there may be times where we're traveling or so forth. But in general, our heart posture should be one of wanting to be part of God's church, worshiping with other people who love God like we do. So here's a question for you. How can you show your love for God this week?
The Mandrells moved to Denver 3 years ago. They didn't know anyone here, and they learned one thing really fast.
8.
If God wanted them to start a new church in a place where people didn't know about Jesus, They'd have to start that new church one person at a time.
I gotta say, I think the Broncos have some of the coolest uniforms.
One of the first families the Mandrells bonded with was the Danteens.
What's your coverage right now? Have you blitzed him at all?
CJ Danteen coaches kids football. That's where he and the Mandrells first met.
Interception.
But you do have a science background.
That was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It was pretty much just football and snacks at the beginning. The invite to church came later, much later.
We say it this way, we invite people into our lives before we invite them to a location.
Paul said to Timothy, fan into flame the gift that is in you.
The plan obviously worked. When the people like the Danteens first showed up to Storyline, they were ready to hear about how Jesus wanted to be their friend, because they'd already seen how the Mandrells wanted to be their friend.
I just think they're real people. They're genuine and they care.
CJ, thank you for investing in my sons in football, for encouraging them and making them feel like young men.
After that, it wasn't long before the Danteens, all of them, told everybody that Jesus had given his life to be their savior. Now, things are different for the Danteens. Now they know that Jesus gave his life to be their savior. And now they pray and read their Bibles every day.